Sorry, this is going to be a little weird because I'm doing a voiceover because the sound just wasn't good enough that I recorded on the beach. Okay, so what I wanted to do was I wanted to show you how to set up when you're doing landscape outside. And I've got my painting set up so that the canvas is facing away, or the paper is facing away from the light, because otherwise I might paint it too dark because there's so much light outside. There's way more light outdoors than indoors. I have this cool thing called an art comber that has a little chair, and I usually use it to put my pastels on it, and it also helps keep my easel from blowing away. So the first thing I'm going to do is I decided what I was going to paint, and of course I forgot my viewfinder because always on the first day of painting you don't have everything you need. But I did look, and I tried to kind of frame my picture and decide how I wanted it to be. Okay, so I've got the trees, I've got the grassy part of the beach, I've got where the sand is going to go, and I want to be careful not to get right in that corner with any of my lines. So for that reason, it's a really good idea to always draw a little outline around your paper to show where the frame would go if you were going to frame it, and to help make sure that you're not composing to the whole piece of paper, but rather to where the frame would go. And then my horizon line, also my eye level where the land meets the sea, and then that little row of trees. And I see I need to make my near trees a little bigger. And you know, I could fill those in and make them darker. But something like this, you don't really need much drawing. This is probably enough. So in landscape, I always start with the sky, because the sky gives you the first big hint of what kind of day it is. So it's an overcast day, but there is some blue out there. So I'm going to start with the blue. So when you're doing a sky outdoors, it's really important to kind of finish the sky as much as you can right from the start, because, you know, it just keeps changing all the time. And so you might have something you really love and then it totally changes. The other thing I do is if it changes to something I like better during the time I'm painting, then I will change it to that. But I need to have enough of the sky that I can relate the land to it. And I usually make the sky pretty realistic, especially the blue part. If it's a blue sky out there, I just make it blue, because I really don't want to have my sky get muddy. And basically I've got three things going on in my sky. I've got the sky, I've got the clouds in shadow, and the clouds in light. And I'm working with the flat side of my pastel. I unwrapped it, and this helps me cover a lot more ground quicker. It's not that speed is like an important virtue, but when you're painting landscape, it can be really good to paint a little fast, because you know, things are changing all the time, and you only have about a 2-hour window of opportunity, or maybe even less. Oh yeah, and a really good idea is to take a picture of your landscape right when you're getting ready to start your color. Although I almost never go back and actually use those photos, but what if you needed it? So like I say, I'm just getting a little more detail in the sky than I normally would. So the water, my first best guess at is it looks really purpley, and it's a really good idea to work on the sky and the water kind of at the same time, because they really will share a lot of similar colors. And then I didn't really mean to make it so blue just now, but that's what happened. So probably it would have been better to put the blue in and then put the purple on top, but that's okay, I'll just put purple on top. So when I look at the trees that are close to me and the trees that are on the horizon line, they look really similar. So I just want to be sure that, that I make them look different from each other. Oh, so, yeah, so I'm gonna, oh, look, there's a heron, and there's the osprey. So you don't really see things like that when you're painting in the studio. So I'm going to use kind of a coolish gray in the distance, and then a warmer color in the trees that are closer to me because warm colors come forward. And I am exaggerating the difference between the two. Um, and because they do seem so much the same to me, I'm actually exaggerating the difference between them more than I would if they weren't so much the same. And then generally speaking in landscape, the horizontal planes are lighter than the vertical planes. So that's one thing you can show right away is just by making your horizontals lighter and doing a more horizontal stroke, you can make those planes look like they're in the light more. And the reason is because they're catching more light from the sky, whereas the vertical planes, except late in the evening or early morning, the vertical planes in landscape tend to be darker. And you want to keep that horizontal feeling going, even if it's grass or bushes or something, because the really important thing is that you have the earth under your feet, not that it has grass on it. And I'm exaggerating this color also because, why not? I can always tone it down later and make it a duller color or more, what we call realistic. So if it looks a little pink to me, I'll make it a lot pink. Like, I don't really see that pink, but I see it a little pink. So I just don't want to make it dull. And I probably should have started that grass with a darker color. It is the only thing you have to remember about pastels in terms of technique is that easier to get light over dark rather than dark over light. Okay, so now I've got the whole thing covered. And so my next question is, what do I need to do to make it better? So I decided I would start by lightening up the sky. And on the horizon, a lot of times this color, it's not just lighter, it's a little bit of a warmer blue, more of a cerulean. So I'm adding some green blue that has a little bit of a greenish cast to it. And then I'm going to use white in the clouds. I think I used it before, but I don't know. It doesn't really look white, but I'm just going to try it anyway. I can't find anything that looks whiter. And by pushing down harder on that white, you see I have to hold my easel to do it, I'm able to make that white be a brighter, more standout color. And by using a different amount of pressure at different times with that same white, I'm also able to make that look like a different color. And then I'm trying to just bring the sky right into the trees, and then I'll put the trees back on top of the sky. Although right now it just looks a little muddy. And actually I decided I would just go ahead and try some yellow, because it said the sky's warmer, so why not actually make it warmer and use some yellow down there. And it's funny, but that yellow kind of makes it go back for me. Even though usually yellow is a color that pulls colors forward. But having it not be such a bright blue makes it go back more. And then try a little pink in the sky and those purples. Yeah, I'm not very good at just copying things, even when I try really hard. Like, I might be up there trying to copy every cloud I see, but it just, I don't know, I'm just not any good at it. So, my hope is just to get a suggestion, um, like a suggestion or an impression, a feeling maybe, and it definitely seems easier to get all those things when you're actually outside painting than when you're inside. You know, it's more of an immersive experience to paint outdoors than just inside. So I've got those trees in the distance too purple, and I do want to put some of those little houses in. So I'm going to start with that. I think I'm using like a light blue. And then I think I'm actually going to use a gray back there. Kind of a bluish gray. And I'm trying to make a little raggedy edge along the top so it looks like trees. A soft edge, I guess. And I need to get a little bit of a shoreline also. So I'm just using gray for that too. It's not like I'm opposed to using gray or neutral colors, I just don't use them first. So, and this is kind of a sandy color, but it's probably a little too bright, so I probably need to tone it down a little bit. So that's how I do things. I just try stuff. I try whatever crosses my mind. And then I just look at that and I see, well, what do I need to do to change that to make it better? And maybe I'll even try a little green. And then maybe a little green in the trees for where there's maybe some pine trees or something. Kind of makes those houses stand out better. And so maybe I could have a little more detail in the distance if I did it farther away from the trees so it wasn't like right behind those close trees. So it didn't, compete with the closer trees so much. So I used a little bit of the red, but then it seems like it's a little too much, so I covered it up again with some of the gray. But that little red just still probably shows through. Because I don't smear it, I never smear it down. Well, and the water seems like it's too dark, so I want to lighten it up before I work on the trees. So I'm just adding a little light on the water. And I'm not trying to finishing anything. I'm kind of doing a stroke that could be a final stroke, but really I'm just thinking about trying to make the color better. And now that I got my water and sky darker, it helps me figure out if I can make my trees lighter or what I need to do. And I've really been trying to figure out how to do trees during stick season without doing all those little details. So I had this idea of making things like a little more, just not so dense on the edges, but it just looks like a bush now. So I'm just trying different things because one thing I've kind of done in my life is just avoided painting when the trees don't have leaves on them. And since I know I'm not going to be able to make it perfect, I need to figure out a way to carry the story or tell the story that I'm trying to tell, like this is a tree without leaves. Um, how can I do that with the least amount of work possible? So like just putting a little light down there at the bottom, so as if you're seeing through the trunks, it's like that kind of helped a lot, I thought. And now I'm just adding in some little branch kind of strokes. And I kind of let that the difference between the light and shadow there on the tree, now that you can't see a thing, but lined up a little too much, so I'm softening that edge between the two of them. At least I hope that's what I'm doing, because it really looked bad. So I just try things, see how I like it, and just try not to panic. Yeah, but I got to tell you, every time somebody walks by me on the beach, I have this little fear they're going to say something terrible to me, like how bad it looks, or but so in the grasses there, I wanted to get the feeling that because sometimes the water completely covers the beach, and so the grasses are all kind of flattened down by the tide. So I wanted to get that feeling, and it's early in the year, obviously, it's just April, and the grasses aren't really growing yet. It's mostly just the old grasses there. So I also want to try to pull that part of the beach closer to me, and the way I'm going to try to do that is by adding more variety and bigger strokes, because things look bigger when they get closer to you. I don't know, the sand was so pink, so now I'm just trying a little violet. And I also was trying to show this idea that the sand is lighter as it gets further away from the water because it's been dry longer as the tide is going up right now. I haven't got stuck on the beach once, or on a little peninsula. Now I always check the tide right before I start on my tide chart. So I thought I'd try to put in some of these little, there's some little like dead roses up there. I mean, they'll probably come back to life, but beach roses and stuff, just little sticks and stuff. But I don't really know if I like that. Like, I always wonder if I cheapen the picture by adding little details. Is that really what I should be doing, or should I just be going for the big statements? But, you know, I just can always paint over anything, so I do anything that crosses my mind. And then I guess a boat went by or something because suddenly we had a few little waves there. In spite of all this wind, which is actually from the west, and I'm looking east, the wind is not making waves. So I'm thinking that maybe I wouldn't spray it. Maybe it would just be just this short little demo, 20 minutes. But then, of course, I had to spray it. So here's what it looks like after it's sprayed. You can see how much darker it got. And I just want to show you how I sprayed it. I didn't want to spray it while Jim was sitting right there filming, so I had him step away. You want to spray with the wind. You want to try not to get it on your glasses because it does kind of ruin your glasses. So I so I'm just basically going kind of like go all the way down kind of slowly, just like psss, and then back up. And then I went down one more time because the fixative wasn't really coming out very good. You don't really want it to run. That would mean you sprayed it too much. You definitely want to expect it to get darker. And if you spray it like this, you have to have a commitment to work on the whole thing again. So almost always I come back and I start with the sky again. Even if I use the same colors, they'll look lighter now because I've sprayed it and made the original colors so much darker. The thing is, I love the texture of how it looks after you spray it. That it gets this sort of layered look. It doesn't look so thick and heavy, and it has more depth in the color. And it separates the layers of colors so that you can see them better underneath. I never blend, hardly ever blend my pastels. I'm just layering it. So I kind of got that carried away with that green color, and the question I have is if you don't go too far, how would you even know where right is if you didn't go sort of too far with your colors, like making it too dark? That just gives me such good information that now I need to lighten it back up again. And in water, especially in water, the spraying really gives you that sense that I feel like that you could drop a rock in it and it would go down through the waves, not just sit on the surface like on the land. And also right after I spray it, that's usually a time I would redraw if I thought I needed to. So now I'm coming back with that white again, and I'm going to use it in a lot of places, but I'm using different amounts of pressure. So that almost makes it like I'm using different colors because some places it's not really covering to the same extent And some places it's going to get really be my strongest lights in the sky. And I'm using it over different colors that are under it anyway. Like up in the clouds, it's different than when I use it over the blue. So since I started the painting, there's actually more contrast in the sky, which is kind of nicer, kind of looks better. So I'm trying to add some more of that contrast in now that I'm starting to see, and I'm doing that by adding lighter lights. I'm sorry about the coat too. I'm never going to wear this coat to film again. I didn't know it would be so distracting to have on a bright blue coat. And really important thing to remember about the skies, it's not a flat sheet like behind your landscape. It's a bowl that's going away from you. So there at the horizon, that's the furthest away from you place. So the clouds will look smaller, probably, not always, but generally speaking, the clouds look smaller on the horizon. There's not quite as much contrast, not so many strong colors. So you want to remember to create depth in your sky, so it doesn't just look like a flat backdrop. And I'll tell you, it's not really easy to do, so it's just something I'm continually working on. So, like maybe I could make the sky exactly like it is if I worked from a photograph and I did a grid on my paper. Um, but in this scenario here where I'm just outside, I've only painted like 20 minutes so far. I just want to give a feeling about it and try to be happy with that. So I want you always to remember not to be ever bound by anything that seems like a rule, and just look and see what's going on around you and paint that. And don't especially ever be bound by something a teacher says to you or I say to you. Just because I think one thing doesn't mean that you have to think that. Um, yeah, that you're just going to go out and you're going to make your own observations. The kind of painting I do is based on personal observation. Yeah, still working on that thing about the sand being lighter further up. And I do tend to have my strokes follow the form. So when I'm working on the beach, I'm using a horizontal stroke. When I'm working on the trees, I'm doing a vertical stroke. The sky is very horizontal. And the water. Oh, now another boat went by a while ago, and now finally there's some real waves. So now I can really put some little waves on the shore. And that's more about the great stuff about painting from real life. It's not static like when you paint from a photograph. So things happen and you see them and you say, oh, I want that. So you add them in. Plus, how awesome is it just to hang out and paint outdoors, studying nature and enjoying yourself? And the sad thing about doing a voiceover on this is like, well, the wind was really wrecking the recording. but also there's all these geese that are called brants, and they're out there in the water. You probably notice them going by every now and then. And they're making they make the coolest noise. They don't really honk or quack. I don't know what they do. They chuckle. So the thing is, once you've sprayed it, you really have to be committed to working on the whole thing because it's such a textural change. And it definitely looks bad under glass if you haven't worked on all of it. And I've made that mistake sometimes, not realize I hadn't worked everywhere, and then I get it framed, and then I can see that texture not looking the same under the glass. Now back to those trees, trying to make them look like they're just a bunch of sticks. So now the sun's starting to come out, and so this is when you have to decide, do you want to just start a new painting or do you want to turn it into a sunny day? Which is, that's usually the tact I take is I'll add the sun in because I don't really, gray days are not my favorite thing. Um, and usually I figure I can paint about 2 hours before there's a big enough light change that I can't keep working on it. But Monet said he could only paint half an hour. But pastels are so great for landscape because they're so fast. You don't have to wait. You don't have to mix. You don't have to wait for them to dry. You just try stuff and just layer them on top of each other. There's not nearly as much chance you'll make mud. Um, it's a great medium unless it rains. If it rains, you're in big trouble. And pastels are my favorite way to paint landscape outdoors. And you can see I don't think too much about what color I'm going to use. I just kind of grab things and stick them up there because it doesn't do me any good to think about it. The only way I can tell if it's going to work is by doing it. So I decided to put some broader strokes in there for those little twiggy things, and I feel kind of better about that because I didn't like them just little thin pencil-y lines. All right, well, I have to quit because it's a totally different day now.